Okay, so today we're going to talk about structuring your paper. I don't want you to feel overwhelmed. I'm going to give you several examples of how you could structure your paper. One of the reasons I'm doing this is because I want to get you thinking in different directions than the traditional intro paragraph with thesis at the end and thesis with, three parts covering three body paragraphs. I want you to take away some bigger picture structure points. So, one way to structure your paper is to use a classical or Aristotelian arrangement, and it consists of these parts: an introduction, where you capture attention and lay out your case; a statement of the background, where you give anything that the reader needs to know in order to understand your argument; the proposition, where you talk about the major points in your argument, kind of like an extended thesis; the proof, which is the meat of the paper, the body of the paper, where you give all of your reasons and evidence, quotes, statistics, facts; a refutation, or I like to call it a concession, where you lay out the opposing views and then refute them; and then a conclusion, where you summarize your main points. You can change the order of the classical arrangement. One way that people often change the order is to move the refutation to different parts in the paper. Maybe you want to have the refutation come first, right after the introduction, so you can refute people's points of view and then hammer them with your argument. Maybe it makes sense to refute the other side's argument point by point throughout your paper. But this is considered the classical arrangement, probably the most common and most related to what you're used to doing. Another way to structure your paper is by using induction. This is probably very different than what you're used to doing. In this case, you lay out specifics, particulars, and then you lead up to your conclusion. So in some respects, you're saving your thesis to the end. This builds suspense. You're laying out interesting particulars, interesting cases, and as the reader moves along, they start to implicitly pick up on the direction you're taking them in, and then you provide the thesis at the end after giving them your argument, and then they've kind of come up with it on their own, so they're in agreement with you. The opposite of that, of course, is deduction, where you reach a conclusion by starting with a general principle or universal truth. So if there's something that everyone believes in, you can start your paper with that, then apply that to your specific case, and then reach your thesis based on that general overall premise and then a minor premise that you give them. Now things get a bit more complex. The Rogerian argument was developed by a psychologist who was more interested in mediating rather than polarizing arguments. So this type of argument is softer than the classical arrangement or the inductive or deductive. In the Rogerian argument, you introduce the problem or the issue at hand. Then you give the other side's view in a neutral way, and you show how these points are valid under certain circumstances, how you might believe them under certain circumstances. Then in the middle of the paper, you turn and give your thesis, your point of view, what you're arguing. And then you do sort of the same thing that you just did. You give the context for your own views and why your own views are valid. And then in the conclusion, you give the results of adhering to your views, you state a solution, you come to some kind of compromise. So this is sort of a softer way of writing an argumentative paper. Probably the most complex model is the Toulmin model, and this was developed by, I think, a logician who was attempting to explain the type of logic that we use in our everyday lives from day to day without thinking about it. For the Toulmin model, you have a claim, which is your argument or thesis, and you have evidence, your support, which leads to your claim. This is the main part, combined with what we call a warrant. By presenting your evidence and pointing it towards this claim, you are implicitly linking the evidence to the claim. So your reader will come up with this sort of unstated, implicit warrant or idea based on the evidence you give that leads to your claim. Other parts of the Toulmin model are backing, which is further assurance or data that you give after that initial evidence; any qualifiers to show that in some circumstances or contexts your claim might not be valid; any reservations explaining the terms and conditions that those particular contexts in which your qualifier exists; and then a rebuttal which is like a concession, giving voice to the other side. This diagram might help to explain the Toulmin model a little bit better. So you provide all this evidence leading to a claim. As people read your evidence, they come up with this implicit understanding about why you're asking them to agree with this claim. You provide some qualifiers and reservations, if applicable, and then you can apply more backing. So the simple example that they give you, an example from everyday life, is we might say, it's raining, therefore I should probably take my umbrella since it will keep me dry on account of its waterproof material, unless, of course, there's a hole in it. So if you use that basic sentence structure, you can create a model for a Toulmin argument. One that's a little bit more serious might be, the fast food industry continues to grow and is not going away. That would be your evidence. Therefore, this would be your claim. Even those of us against fast food should invest in it, since investing has the power to persuade businesses to change. And that last part, since investing has the power to persuade businesses to change, would be the warrant. So that second example really only has the evidence, fast food industry continues to grow, the claim, therefore even those of us against it should invest in it, and the warrant, since investing in it has the power to persuade businesses to change. I think the Toulmin model is good for everyday logic, for abstract examples, and also for arguments that might have weaknesses in them. It seems like they provide, lots of opportunity for debate in the Toulmin model. So, some big picture things I want you to take away from this is that your thesis doesn't necessarily have to be at the beginning of the paper. You can put it at the beginning in that first paragraph, but there are other places to put it as well. Also, that each of these structures is malleable. So you can pick the classical structure but leave part of it out, or pick the Rogerian structure and add something from the Toulmin structure to it. And then, overall, you need to let your paper find its own structure rather than trying to force it into a certain form. And you can use any of these structures to help you come up with an outline for your paper. You may have learned, the traditional outline in the past. You can use that if you want. But you need to organize your notes and structure your paper in this outline, thinking about what overall structure you're going to use for your paper. Also, the outline that you produce is a working outline, so it might be incomplete. There may be gaps in your research, and then there may be notes that you also took that you decide not to use. So the outline that you turn into me might indicate, I need to find this quote, or I need to find this statistic. Again, you can use the traditional alphanumerical outline. You could create a web or map if you're a more spatial person. I like to do my outlines just as a list, where I say, this is what I'm going to do in paragraph 1. This is what I'm going to do in paragraph 2. Or you could formulate it after one of these structures, inductive, deductive, classical, Rogerian. So here is just an example of what you might turn in for your outline. This is for a paper on cell phones. And I've taken the same information and just put it in different formats. So that's the traditional alphanumerical outline. Please put your thesis on your outline. Put your thesis in bold so that I can easily find it, because it might not be at the beginning. And just remember, for that traditional alphanumerical outline, the main rule is that if you have a 1, you need to have a 2. If you have an A, you need to have a B. If you have an Arabic numeral 1, you need to have a 2. That's kind of the rule for that one. Otherwise, you don't have enough information to include. You could do the visual spatial one if you'd like. Maybe put your thesis in the middle and have the branches coming off of it. And if you're following any of those structures, you could label those boxes with the part of the structure that they fit. That's just a continuation of the web outline. You could do a list. This is the one that I always use. I just put my thesis, and then I like to write my topic sentences. That really helps me to organize the paper. Or you could formulate it after one of the structures that I've just given you. Now your outline should be a little bit more detailed than what I'm showing you on the screen here. It needs to be at least a page. So you don't have to retype your notes, but some of you might want to. If you took them by hand, you're going to be typing them anyway, and then you could write the paper right from the outline. But you should put things in like, include statistic from Smith, or quote by Nurse Kaluski, or Jim and Ben car accident example. So, put in enough information that you know what note card or what note you're referring to. And there's the Rogerian again, the same information in the Rogerian structure. So your assignment is you need to come up with an outline that's at least one full page. Include your thesis somewhere, put it in bold so that I can see it. We'll go over thesis statements soon. Use your MLA style heading unless you're doing APA. I'll show you how to do that. Try to include your topic sentences. If you're using the alphanumerical outline, put a full topic sentence for your Roman numerals. If you're making a list, include a topic sentence, delineating each paragraph. I think that makes it easier to organize the information and to write your paper later. And you can pull your topic sentences right from those titles that you put on your notes. And let's see, you don't have to retype your notes, but you can if you want. And I think that's it.